Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CAF News. My name is Kevin Donovan, here again as usual with my friend Brice. This week, the ground under the architecture profession moved again. Not a new tool, not a new framework, but kind of more structural shifts. We're going to be talking about organizations kind of formalizing AI orchestration as a very operational discipline. And then the effects of AI on security architecture and how we're seeing a movement from static controls to, again, more operational 24/7 discipline, adversary behavior frameworks. Brice, what are you thinking about these trends we're seeing? How have you been?
I'm doing great. Well, lots of stuff is happening, Kevin, and let's start with these trends and what do they mean? I think this is really important in terms of where we're going. So the first thing we're talking about is this idea of the increased role of agentic AI to orchestrate and choreograph things, right? And now this actually challenges conventional enterprise architecture in many ways, but fundamentally it's a shift in how capabilities get composed and used in a more dynamic way than we've ever seen. This, I think, is going to really strain our current methods. It's huge. The idea of doing like a static capability diagram and some value streams and then modeling that down doesn't capture, I don't think, the essence of what we're doing with some of these frameworks and their ability to adapt dynamically. It's really going to be interesting going forward because we definitely need more resilient architectures, and AI is really an enabler that's opening up the ability for these architectures to also dynamically reconfigure themselves. So there's a huge question. What does that mean to our frameworks? And what does that mean to the enterprise architect and solution architect as professions?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. What happens to the role, the profession? As organizations start dealing with this, with agentic processes and AI orchestration, does EA absorb these roles? Are they separate somehow? And then what sort of frameworks or models will support this kind of governance? Um, you know,
Great
yeah,
question. Great question. I think the first one, I'm gonna take a stab at this. I think
yeah.
will EA absorb it? The real question is, what role is best suited to absorb this? Is it the software engineer? Is it the business manager? Is it the enterprise architect? I think what we're going to see is that it's somebody that can combine all these worlds. I think the EA brings that broad range of skills together. However, they're going to need to have, I think, at least significantly more understanding around the engineering and the impact of these dynamic frameworks as they build them out. And I think we're also going to see, this is one of the things I talked about in my upcoming book. How do these frameworks look? And I don't think in any sense we're at an endpoint. We're going to be, our thinking is going to be evolving on this, but it's a question, who can understand these frameworks and then relate them to getting value and outcome delivery. And I think this is a third but hidden point in here is when you start to look at these agentic orchestration platforms or ecosystems, the real question comes up, what do they enable from a business model point of view? And I think the answer moves outside the scope of product delivery to something that is far more closer to service dominant goods and service dominant logic delivery. So you're going for an outcome and you're enabling that person who buys something not just to get one thing, but a bunch of stuff together that really delivers the experience to them.
Yeah, yeah. An interesting point, for everyone out there listening, this would be great to get some kind of crowdsourced information about what are your organization's view on these kinds of roles? Is this starting to emerge? Is this something that's being talked about? And do you, as architects, do you own these activities? Do you own these roles, or do you interface with them? It's something of a new domain of architecture. It'd be interesting to see where it's falling out, in
It
practical
it
terms.
is a new domain, and that really brings in the second topic, the idea of being able to understand adversarial behavior and build adversarial behavior frameworks. So the original intent of this topic is, how do you anticipate breaches? How do you anticipate penetration? Because it's going to happen. It's not if, it's a matter of when it happens. And also it's very dynamic. So, as an adversary goes through your value chain looking for vulnerabilities and ways to do things, they're going to find them. And it's a question of how do you deal with it. I was a little bit surprised that, when we talk about adversarial behavioral frameworks, it was very much a pattern. The original story was very much pattern based when I saw it. I was a little bit surprised that it didn't talk a little bit about the evil digital twins out there and the ability to maybe forecast what adversaries might be doing and predict it. But again, I think this goes into really much the first thing is we're moving into a new world, very dynamic, a really different type of enterprise architecture that it's really going to test the understanding of architects to go across different roles.
Yeah, it's interesting in the security domain. We're certainly hopefully long past the times where security was a bolt-on after you finished everything. But how embedded is it? I think that more and more, we're seeing some AI generated threats out there, and those won't be a weekly or daily occurrence. There will be hundreds or thousands of them daily. And so you have to, like, perimeter is no longer, I think, going to be even possible. I think you have to build in resilience. Architecture has to become threat aware by default. And yeah, if you're not reflecting adversary paths like this, if you're just looking at business flows, then I don't think that you will be able to handle the oncoming onslaught. And I don't think that's, crying wolf, to be honest.
It's not crying wolf. It's pointing out that there's unknowns as we go forward. We need to start designing for those unknowns. As architects, we need to understand them. I mean, the architectures that build in future resilience are going to fare better than the ones that don't. Whatever you do, I think if you do something, it's better than nothing. But let's flip this around now to the market. And how is the market? How are business viewing this whole thing? And, we had a really interesting discussion leading up to this. And the real question is, do they really understand it? So, if you compare what's happening now in the market as a result of some of these things, I think there's a lot of, is it uncertainty? Is it reluctance? Is it caution that people are looking at? You see NVIDIA, for instance, did their best report ever, and it drops on the wave of cautionary investors. And I think that makes sense. I don't think we're headed. I think there's a lot of input. There's a lot of people that speculate for a variety of reasons that we're headed to burst the bubble. I don't think we've even entered the bubble yet. The real thing is, as we go forward, people don't understand the changes that are coming. We're looking at some GPUs and maybe a company or two like Palantir and Big Bear that are adapting their architectures for these changes in very simple ways. Nothing really dynamic yet. What happens when these massive changes really start to hit us? We're going to see a whole second wave of AI, and the bubble is nowhere near bursting, in my opinion. What do you think, Kevin?
No, yeah, the whole "are we in an AI bubble?" I think it's good we address that because it is so timely. The market is going to do what the market does. It's sentiment based. People are a little spooked right now for any number of reasons. But I don't think that the long-term picture has changed at all. And I think a lot of it maybe is just as much because the broader market, the general, man on the street, doesn't even really understand AI and the importance and the broad applicability of it. Just as much as we as architects probably don't appreciate it very fully. Within organizations having to address these orchestration and agentic, challenges, and then from the outside to be able to not only enable business today, but also the adversary of tomorrow. I think that people tend to underestimate the effects and probably the speed with which we will experience those effects. And that has implications, of course. Again, I would call out to, to our community here, how do you think that your role needs to evolve? And your thought leadership, your voice. What kind of skills do you need to develop? What kind of questions do you need to be asking the board, stakeholders, to be able to bring people around to this kind of an awareness? What of this can you start weaving into your architecture practice today? I think those are the kinds of things that will get us moving down the road to opening people's eyes and being able to be prepared, if not fully.
Absolutely, Kevin. And I think you really hit the hammer on the nail on one thing, that we need a dialogue looking forward. These AI changes are not, I think people right now are thinking, oh, this is great. We're building a better AI system. And that I don't think is the right way to look at it. What we're doing is we're using AI to build a whole layer of enablement that eventually will be able to not only orchestrate AI technologies, but quantum, other things like neuromorphic, a whole, bunch of technologies that are literally a few years away, and it will be able to coordinate them. So I think we need to start that dialogue sooner rather than later. We need to recognize that these systems are going to be fundamentally more dynamic than anything we've ever dealt with. And it would be great, like you're saying, let's get comments below. And also, I think if anybody wants to get together, it would be great to start maybe a group to talk about some of these things going forward. Lots of stuff happening. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of the feeling right now is kind of both scary and exciting. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that two stories that seem so disparate could kind of point to a single truth, if I may, that architecture is shifting, and the responsibility and role of architecture is shifting, whether organizations, see it, believe it or not. This designing of systems, and as you mentioned, finish your capability map and have it on paper and put it on the wall. It's becoming more about designing behaviors, agent behavior, attacker behavior, the behaviors of the organization around you. And if you're not adapting to these kind of new operational dynamics 24/7, then you're probably still working on, last year's enterprise. So yeah, I think that you need to be thinking about refactoring, what the target operating model is, and including these AI orchestration and AI attack roles and update security architectures to map adversary behaviors. That will certainly put you ahead of 90% of the people in the field, I would guess.
Absolutely. Great discussion, Kevin. As usual, please, if you can, join in, comment below. And thank you, Kevin. Excellent discussion.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.